I've been developing a coffee shop in Austin for 4 years. My girlfriend was helping, so I gave her 30%. Then I found out that she had gifted her share to a fitness trainer with whom she'd gone to Mexico. I came back and I rebranded. Now the coffee shop is named after him, with a broken heart logo. The first thing I notice every morning when I step into the cafe is the silence. It's strange. I've never been one to wake up before the sun, but over the years, my routines become a quiet ritual. I get here early, before the rush of the morning crowd, before the noise, before the distractions. It's just me in the empty space, the smell of stale coffee from the night before, the stillness of a place that's so often full of life. I pull the blinds up, letting the early lights spill in. The street outside is just waking up too. Joggers, delivery trucks, and a few early birds grabbing their caffeine fix. It's peaceful. It's mine. Or at least it used to be. I've spent 4 years building this cafe from the ground up. It wasn't supposed to be anything special at first, just a small, cozy place to serve good coffee. But I poured everything into it, every penny I had saved, every ounce of energy. I wanted this place to stand for something more than just a place to grab a cup of joe. I wanted it to be a home for people, a little sanctuary, and she was there with me through it all. Mia. When we first met, I had no idea how much she'd change everything. She came into the cafe one day, just like any other customer, ordering a cappuccino. I was behind the counter, fumbling with the milk frother. I'd only just hired my first barista, and the machines were still foreign to me. She smiled, the kind of smile that makes you forget what you were doing. "You look like you're struggling," she said. "Maybe you should let me handle that." She had this energy, calm but assertive, like she had everything figured out and wasn't afraid to step in. We hit it off instantly. She didn't mind the mess or the chaos of a new business. In fact, she seemed to thrive on it. I found that reassuring. She wasn't just a customer, she was someone I could rely on. And after a few weeks, I made her an offer. She could come on board, help me run the place, and we could build something together. It made sense. She had a background in business. She had a head for numbers and a knack for organizing. I had the coffee and she had the skills to help me grow this thing into something real. We talked about the future, the potential, how we could make a name for ourselves. I trusted her. We made plans. We were in this together. I didn't think twice when I offered her 30% of the business. After all, it was only fair. She was doing the hard work behind the scenes. I could handle the day-to-day, but it was her touch that made the place feel like it had heart. It's funny how you don't see the cracks forming until they're too deep to fix. At first, everything felt perfect. We worked well together. I'd be in the back roasting beans while she managed the front, coordinating with suppliers, checking inventory, running the accounts. It was a delicate balance, but it worked. And as the cafe began to thrive, so did our relationship. I was happy. She was happy. But that happiness was fleeting. I remember the day I first started to feel something shift. It wasn't big, just a quiet change, a shift in the air that I couldn't explain. We had just launched our new line of pastries, and I was feeling good about how things were going. The place was packed. People were buzzing, commenting on how great everything tasted, how our menu had expanded. I noticed Mia wasn't around much. At first, I thought it was just her being busy. She'd always been the more hands-on one, especially when it came to the business side of things. But as the days passed, she seemed to disappear more and more. She wasn't staying late like she used to, or helping with the planning of new events. I should have known something was off when she stopped showing up to our regular meetings, the ones where we talked about finances, growth, and all the little details that kept the business running smoothly. She'd just disappear. And then came that evening. I was behind the counter, working on a new batch of beans, when I noticed her phone buzzing on the table. She was in the back room with one of the baristas, chatting about new orders. I didn't think much of it until I saw the name flashing on the screen. Leo. Leo. I didn't know a lot about him, but I knew he was the personal trainer at the gym down the street. Mia had always been into fitness, always talked about getting a better body and how she admired him. At first, I didn't think much of it. But that night, something about the way her phone was buzzing, The way she was acting when she came back into the room, I don't know. It was different. I should have confronted her. I should have asked her what was going on, why Leo's name was showing up every time I turned around. But I didn't. I didn't want to seem insecure. I didn't want to be the jealous boyfriend. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I could feel it, like the warmth slipping out of my fingers, the easy comfort between us becoming strained. But I didn't want to admit it. Not yet. And then one day, Mia was gone. She didn't leave a note. She didn't say goodbye. It wasn't until I found her things missing from the apartment, her clothes gone, her toothbrush. That's when I realized. I thought she was just away for a weekend trip, or maybe she needed space. But then I checked her phone, and there it was. The truth like a slap across my face. She was in Mexico, with Leo. And worse than that, she'd transferred her 30% stake in the cafe to him, without a word to me. Just a signature on a piece of paper, a legal form that bound him to this place, to my cafe. I stood there for a while staring at the screen of her phone, the message from her lawyer confirming the transfer of ownership. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, sadness, confusion, everything all at once. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I just waited. I waited for the pain to fade, and it did, slowly. But as it faded, something else took root. Something colder, something smarter. I wasn't going to let her ruin this place, not without a fight. I don't know what made me wait so long to make the move. Maybe it was because I had invested so much of myself into this place, into the idea that it could be something bigger than just coffee, something personal, my dream. Maybe I was hoping she'd come back. Maybe I was waiting for some sign that this was all a misunderstanding. Or maybe I just couldn't bear to believe that she had so easily torn everything down. But that was the thing about betrayal. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for your approval. It just happens. And you're left standing in the wreckage, wondering how the hell you didn't see it coming. After Mia left with Leo, I sat in the cafe for days. The place felt hollow. The air was thick with the weight of what had just happened. I was surrounded by the same coffee machines, the same tables, the same logo on the wall. Everything I'd worked so hard to build, now tainted. But I wasn't going to let her destroy it. I wasn't going to let Leo's name be attached to my work, to my reputation. I'd fought too hard for this place. It wasn't just a business. It was a reflection of me, of everything I had poured into it. I refused to let them take that from me. The first step was the lawyer. I called Henry, the one person who had helped me with some of the legal paperwork in the past. He wasn't exactly a friend, but he was professional, and I trusted him to keep his mouth shut. I didn't want to alert Mia or Leo that I was about to make a move. "Henry," I said, my voice flat, "I need you to help me with something. It's complicated." We met at a coffee shop on the east side of town, somewhere quiet, away from the usual crowd. I remember how awkward it felt, sitting across from him, knowing that I was about to tear apart a part of my life that I had built with my own hands. "I need to change the business name," I said, tapping my fingers nervously against my cup. "I can't keep it under the same branding. Too much of her is here." Henry nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "I get it. You want to start fresh, but you have to be careful. You know as well as I do that rebranding is more than just a new name. You'll have to let go of all the assets tied to the old one, the website, social media accounts, all of it." I leaned back, letting the weight of the decision settle in. "I know, but I'm doing it my way. I'm not just changing the name. I'm going to redesign everything. The logo, the decor, the whole vibe. And I want the new name to be a reminder of what happened here, what she did. I want it to stay, like a scar." He raised an eyebrow. "Scar? You sure about that? This is a business, not a personal vendetta." I stared at him, the flicker of something colder in my chest. "It's both. And I need you to help me make sure it's legal. I don't care what it takes." Henry didn't argue. He was smart enough to know when I wasn't going to back down. "All right, I'll take care of the paperwork, but you'll have to handle the rebranding. That's your part." When I left his office that day, I had a plan. It wasn't about starting over. It was about reclaiming what was mine. I was going to show them both that they hadn't destroyed me. I wasn't going to let Leo walk in here, act like he owned the place, and take it all away. I was going to make sure everyone knew who truly built this. The next few weeks were a blur of design mock-ups, legal documents, and late nights at the cafe. I dove into the work with a kind of obsessive focus, putting all my energy into transforming the place. I didn't talk to Mia. I didn't even want to hear from her. Leo's name was now officially tied to the cafe, but I didn't care. That was going to change. I hired a new design team telling them to tear apart everything and start fresh. The baristas who'd been working with me from the beginning stayed loyal. They knew what had happened and they respected my decision to move forward. The rebranding wasn't just about new colors or a fresh coat of paint. It was about making a statement. I wanted to leave no room for ambiguity. I wanted every single person who stepped through the door to feel the weight of what I had been through. We went with a broken heart as the new logo, simple but effective. It was a symbol of the fracture, the betrayal, but also of strength. It was a heart that had been cracked but still beat, still stood strong. And the name? I didn't want to forget what had happened, but I didn't want it to be too obvious either. After hours of brainstorming, I finally landed on something that felt fitting. Leo's Heartbreak Brew. It was perfect. It was subtle, yet bold. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the story, the scars she left, the lessons learned, and the strength I was building from the ashes of my own pain. I couldn't help but smile to myself as I stood in front of the new sign, looking up at the sleek, clean logo, the broken heart, a reminder, a mark of the past, and a new beginning. The day we unveiled the rebranding was the day I felt the shift. I'd invited the regulars, the loyal customers who had been with me from the start. They came in, looked around, and seemed confused at first. "What happened to the old logo?" one of them asked, eyes wide as they noticed the new name on the door. I smiled and handed them their drink. "Nothing happened. It's just a new chapter." But as I stood behind the counter, watching them sip their coffee, I felt a sense of satisfaction. This place was mine again. It was better, it was stronger, and I wasn't done yet. I didn't expect them to come back, but as I stood by the counter, watching the crowd of regulars filter in, I saw a familiar face. It was Mia and Leo. They walked in like they owned the place, eyes scanning the room as if they were looking for someone, maybe expecting to see a new fresh-faced owner. They didn't recognize me right away, of course. I had changed too. I'd cut my hair, shaved off the beard, dressed sharper. The new decor made the place feel different too, but it was the name that hit them like a brick. "Leo's Heartbreak Brew," Mia said under her breath. I watched them look up at the sign. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but I saw the realization hit their faces. They knew, and in that moment I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to make a scene. They were in my space now, and they would always be reminded of what they had done. The days after the rebranding felt different. There was a quiet thrill in it. It wasn't just the business I was rebuilding. It was my own sense of control, the feeling of taking something broken and turning it into something even better. But even as I watched customers pour in, enjoying their coffee in the cafe that felt like mine again, I couldn't ignore the fact that Mia and Leo had crossed my mind more than once. At first, I told myself I was done thinking about them. I had built this place from nothing. I wasn't going to let them keep me up at night. But every time I saw a couple walk in, or someone made a joke about a broken heart, I felt the wound reopen. I knew I had to let it all go, but the resentment lingered, the bitterness. And it wasn't just personal anymore. It was business. When Mia and Leo walked in that first day after the reopening, I didn't even flinch. I wanted to walk up to them, demand they leave, but I didn't. I watched from the counter, my fingers curled around the edge of the register. I'd already won. They could stand there trying to enjoy their overpriced lattes, but I knew something they didn't. I had the upper hand. But that wasn't enough. I needed more. I started getting feedback from regulars. They hadn't noticed much at first, but the change in atmosphere was palpable. It was subtle, but there was an air of mystery around the cafe. The new logo, the name. It was like the place had taken on an identity of its own, one that didn't belong to the past. I could see it in the eyes of my customers. They were curious. They wanted to know what had happened here. What was this place really about? And the best part? They didn't have to ask. Not yet. A week into the new branding, I ran into one of the baristas, Jessica, who'd been with me from the start. She was nervous, her eyes darting around as if she were unsure whether or not to bring something up. "You all right?" I asked, wiping my hands on the towel. The steady hum of the espresso machine filled the silence between us. She hesitated. "It's about Mia." I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about her?" "She's been coming around lately," Jessica said, leaning in a little closer. "I've seen her standing across the street looking in." My stomach churned, but I didn't let it show. "So? What does she want?" "She's—" "I don't know," Jessica said, her voice dropping lower. "But I overheard her talking to Leo. They said something about how they were going to buy the place back." My fingers gripped the counter a little harder. "Buy the place back?" Jessica nodded. "Yeah. I don't think they understand what you've done here, but they seem to think, I don't know, that they have some kind of claim." I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't surprised. Mia and Leo hadn't thought this through. They hadn't realized that my rebranding wasn't just a change in design or marketing strategy. It was a statement. It was mine now. But I couldn't let it go like this. Not after what they had done. And that's when it clicked. The revenge wasn't about big gestures. It wasn't about yelling or confronting them. It was about something subtler. Something that would hurt more in the long run. I was going to take their own strategy, the one they'd used to get ahead of me, and turn it against them. I met with Henry again the next day. He had the same detached professional look he always had, but this time, he seemed more interested in what I had to say. "I need to set up a meeting with Mia," I said, straight to the point. "I want her to sign some papers. Nothing major, just a few things that will help me secure the ownership of the business moving forward." Henry raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" "I'm going to leverage her mistake," I said, the words tasting like poison on my tongue. "I'm going to tie Leo's name to the failure of her business idea. She gave him the share, not me. She thinks she can walk away clean, but I'm not going to let that happen." Henry's lips twitched into something that resembled a smile. "You're serious about this?" "I'm dead serious. You'll handle the legal stuff. I'm going to make sure this place stays mine, but we're going to make them pay for underestimating me." Over the next few days, I made sure the cafe continued to run like a well-oiled machine. I paid attention to the details, the quality of the coffee, the atmosphere, the customers' reactions. I kept my ear to the ground, listening for any signs that Mia and Leo were getting closer to making a move. And then, the call came. It was Mia. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello?" "Mason," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I've been thinking, maybe we could meet. Talk about how we can fix this." I raised an eyebrow. "Fix this?" She wasn't going to fix anything. She was going to fix her own mess. "I don't think there's anything to fix," I replied, my voice cool. "I think you've made your choice. But if you're looking for closure, I'm happy to give it to you." I could hear the hesitation in her voice. She wasn't expecting me to be so cold. "Okay," she said after a long pause. "Let's meet at the cafe. I'll come by tomorrow." I smiled, but she couldn't see it. "I'll be waiting." The day of the meeting arrived. I was there early, setting up the cafe as usual. I made sure everything was pristine, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. As the hours passed, I could feel the tension building. Then the door opened and she walked in. Mia. I didn't stand up to greet her. I didn't need to. She looked around, scanning the newly rebranded space, her eyes finally landing on the broken heart logo above the counter. I could see the realization sink in. She knew what I was doing. She knew the message I was sending. "Mason." She said my name, but it was laced with a mix of disbelief and frustration. This isn't what we agreed on." I met her gaze, calmly wiping a cup with a towel. "What do you want, Mia?" "I want my share back," she snapped, her voice rising. "Leo and I were partners in this. You can't just take everything from us." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You gave it away. Don't forget that." Her face flushed. "You're being petty. This is childish." "Is it?" I asked, a subtle smile curling my lips. "Because I think this place looks pretty good, don't you? And it's all mine." She didn't respond right away. She couldn't, because it was true. She couldn't take it back, and I wasn't going to let her. Mia stood there, her face red, with a mix of anger and disbelief. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, but she wasn't getting the answer she wanted. She opened her mouth to argue, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Before you say anything else, Mia," I said, my voice colder than I had intended, "I want you to understand something. This isn't personal. This is business. The moment you handed your share to Leo, you made your decision. I've made mine." She stared at me for a moment, her lips trembling slightly. "This isn't over," she spat, her eyes blazing. "I'll make sure of it." I didn't react. Instead, I watched her storm out, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor as she left. The door swung shut with a soft thud, and I let out a slow breath. It wasn't the confrontation I had expected, but it was the one I needed. It wasn't about shouting, about trying to force her to regret her actions. It was about knowing she'd made the wrong move. Later that day, I took a step back and surveyed the cafe. The grand reopening was just around the corner. The new brand was catching on. People were talking about it. They'd noticed the heart logo. They'd noticed the name. I could feel the energy in the air, and I knew it was going to be a success. It was time for the final touch, the one thing I knew would seal the deal. I dialed Henry's number. "Everything's set on your end?" I asked, my voice steady. He responded with a simple, "Yes, Mason. I've got everything ready. Just give the go-ahead." I smiled to myself. The plan had worked perfectly. The final revenge wasn't going to be a public spectacle. It wasn't about ruining anyone's reputation in the papers or staging a big dramatic confrontation. It was subtler, beautiful. The revenge was in the success of this cafe. It was the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal, and it was going to hurt them more than any scream or confrontation could. The night before the grand reopening, I stood alone in the cafe, letting the quiet hum of the espresso machines calm my mind. The new look was complete. The signs were up. The heart logo shone brightly above the door. I had made the place mine, and now the world would see it. In the morning, I'd invite everyone in. The press, the regulars, and anyone who wanted to take a peek at the newest coffee shop in town. It wasn't just about coffee. It was about a story. It was about the rise from the ashes. A heart broken but mended. And that's what I wanted them to see. The day of the grand reopening, I stood behind the counter, watching the first few customers trickle in. The familiar faces, the excited chatter. It was all starting to feel real. But even though the atmosphere was light, I couldn't ignore the sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Today was the day. As the clock struck noon, Mia and Leo walked in. I had been expecting them. They hesitated when they saw the new signs, their eyes flicking over the rebranding, the logo. I saw the surprise register on their faces, followed by a quick flash of irritation. Mia's eyes narrowed as she scanned the place, her gaze finally locking on me. Leo was beside her, his posture tense, though he was trying to act casual. I didn't greet them. I didn't say a word. I just continued to do what I did best. Pour coffee. The subtle hum of the machines, the clink of the espresso shots, the customers chatting in the background. It was my world now. Mia and Leo ordered, trying to act normal, but I could tell they were uncomfortable. They had been expecting some kind of confrontation, a scene, but all they got was calm, peace, and of course, the name of the cafe. Leo's Heart. I hadn't chosen it lightly. It was a reminder, but it was also a statement. It was a testament to what had been broken and what had been rebuilt. It was a subtle twist of fate, a way of letting them know, without saying a word, that they would never escape the consequences of their actions. The name would always be there, hanging above their heads every time they walked by. Mia didn't even try to hide her reaction. Her face twitched as she read the sign. I watched her, waiting for her to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she pulled Leo toward the corner of the cafe, her voice low as she muttered something to him. I couldn't hear the exact words, but it didn't matter. They knew. They understood. The damage had been done. But now it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about beauty, the kind of beauty that couldn't be undone. As they left, Leo turned to look up at the name one last time, his face drawn in confusion and frustration. Mia, on the other hand, didn't even bother. She kept her gaze straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the weight of what had just happened. But I could see the regret in her eyes. It wasn't about the business anymore. It was about something deeper, something she couldn't take back. I watched them disappear into the crowd of people on the sidewalk, and I let out a quiet sigh. It was over, but not for them. The cafe was mine now. It was everything I had worked for. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of energy had been worth it. And when Mia and Leo walked past this place, when they looked up at that sign, they would remember. They would remember who had won. And that was the most satisfying part. I smiled to myself. There was no need for loud confrontation. The quietest victory was always the sweetest. The heart above the door wasn't just a logo. It was a story, my story, and no one could take that from me.